You're listening to Romancing in Paris on Paris Underground Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? Hello, and welcome back to Romancing in Paris. In this third tour around the arrondissements that we've been doing, many of the venues have had a similar theme. All-in-one date spots. That is, places which have romantic appeal and a fascinating history, along with dining options right on site, whether it was the Parc Rive de Seine or the charming Village Saint-Paul from the last episode. Today's episode achieves this too, but offers a different ambiance and type of history than the other places recently covered. Grab your chérie, we're hopping back across the Seine River to the 5th District to take a stroll down, or rather up, La Rue Mouffetard. For this particular episode, back in the 5th, I'd originally thought about doing the Place de la Contrescarpe, which is at the top of Rue Mouffetard, but then I reckoned there wasn't perhaps enough to say about just the square itself. So I'm pairing it with the street, since they are rather intertwined. While this charming left bank street isn't a secret, it isn't overly crowded, nor overly touristy. It has a good balance of both locals and visitors. I don't spend a whole lot of time here, as I have to confess I'm a little more of a right banker. However, I'm still fond of the street. It was also the subject of a chapter in my book of short stories, There's Only One Paris, so a renewed interest in it was sparked for me while working on the book. Let's start off by learning a little more about the history of Rue Mouffetard, or La Mouffe, as it's affectionately called by local residents. La Rue Mouffetard runs southeast through the 5th District, from behind the Pantheon to the Les Gobelins area, along its path weaving a captivating tale of history, resilience, and cultural heritage. This storied street, with its meandering cobblestones and charming storefronts, has stood witness to the evolution of the city over the centuries, from its ancient Roman origins to its present-day vibrancy. Rue Mouffetard traces its roots all the way back to the Roman era. This ancient road connected the Roman city of Lutetia, the name of Paris back then, to the towns to the south, and thus inevitably on to Rome. The street owes its name to the Latin term Mouffetardus, meaning mountain of gypsum, as it was located near a gypsum quarry. Even today, remnants of its Roman past can be found in the occasional archaeological discoveries made in the area. I'll get more into these a little later on. During the Middle Ages, Rue Mouffetard flourished as one of the principal routes leading to Paris. The street became an essential artery for trade, connecting the city to the countryside and attracting merchants, craftsmen, and pilgrims. Alongside the trade, numerous taverns, inns, and shops sprouted, making Rue Mouffetard a busy commercial hub. Its strategic location near the University of Paris, much of which was and still is in the 5th, further added to its significance. Rue Mouffetard has a long-standing tradition as a marketplace. As early as the 13th century, the street hosted a thriving market known as the Marché des Patriarches. Over the years, it transformed into a daily market, found at the street's southern end, with shops selling fresh produce, cheese, bread, and other gastronomic delights. Rue Mouffetard's charm and picturesque ambiance have been a source of inspiration for artists and writers. Renowned literary figures such as Ernest Hemingway, George Orwell, and Victor Hugo found solace and inspiration in the street's bohemian atmosphere. It has also been immortalized by photographers like Eugène Agathe and Henri Cartier-Bresson. With this little background information established, I think it's about time to visit the street together, virtually. I recommend starting with the southern bottom end of the street for a few reasons, even though this will mean having to climb the hill. It's a rather gentle slope. However, this is coming from someone who lives on the tallest hill in the city, Montmartre, and is used to climbing up hills. Starting at the bottom also means you'll have the splendid view up it. At its base, it's framed by the fruit and vegetable vendors on one side and the lovely Saint-Médard church on the other. In addition, if you're coming here for the first time, I might suggest arriving mid to late morning, and then you can pick up some picnic supplies at the food shops to enjoy in the venue I'm going to mention later on. Not all the vendors come out in the afternoon, so coming in the afternoon is less advised on a first trip, but more than fine if you've been here before, or if you'd like to end with a drink or meal at the top around Place de la Contrescarpe. You could also start your outing with a coffee on one of the terraces at the bottom to savor those beautiful views, and a quiet moment with your chérie. Although it isn't one of the most famous churches in Paris, Saint-Médard is a real gem. Its history can be traced back to the 12th century when a small chapel dedicated to Saint-Médard, the patron saint of weather, was constructed on the site. Over time, the chapel evolved into a larger church, reflecting the growing importance of this area. During the medieval period, Saint-Médard became a significant religious center, attracting religious pilgrims and worshippers from near and far. Saint-Médard has undergone several architectural transformations over the centuries, reflecting the changing artistic styles and cultural influences of each era. The current structure primarily dates to the 17th century, following a series of renovations and expansions. The church showcases a harmonious blend of Gothic and classical architectural elements, with its elegant facade, towering spire, and intricate sculpture work. Saint-Médard gained a notoriety during the 18th century due to a religious movement known as the miraculous convulsionaries. Followers of this movement believed in the miraculous powers of the church and sought healing through convulsions and ecstasies. The movement led to a period of intense devotion, controversy, and scrutiny, with the church eventually being closed down by authorities due to the disturbances caused. The events surrounding the miraculous convulsionaries have left an undeniable mark on the history of the church. After your coffee, or if you've skipped that, I'd suggest popping in to see the interior, as well as the charming little garden to its south side, which is especially beautiful in springtime when it's ablaze with cherry blossoms. As you're about to start climbing Rue Mouffetard, you'll notice some beautiful shop facades. The painted one of Androuet Cheese Shop is particularly attractive and gives you the feel of Paris of centuries past. This is an excellent cheese shop in case you're gathering up some picnic supplies. As you ascend, you'll pass more drool-worthy shops, from bakeries to those selling specialty food items. Up ahead a little is Dose, an excellent coffee place which roasts its own beans. in case you'd prefer a coffee to go rather than a sit-down one at the beginning of your stroll, which I recommended. Take your time meandering up the street. Its food shops are gradually swapped for clothing shops and other boutiques. In the mix are a few restaurants. Some more traditional ones, like La Grange, a charming Savoyard restaurant with wooden beams and old-fashioned tools decorating the walls, La Bourgogne, where you can sample a delicious cassoulet fromagère, or Café Tournebride, known for its delectable French onion soup. An excellent modern meal can be enjoyed at Flocon, which has a regularly changing menu of creative market-driven cuisine. It has a little back courtyard for a romantic meal when the weather is nice. Towards the top of the street, you'll encounter a side street, Rue du Pot-au-Feu, a narrow, alluring pedestrian street filled with restaurants, which I recommend more for taking in the ambiance than actually eating at. Back on Rue Mouffetard, the street comes to an end at the very picturesque Place de la Contrescarpe. If you're enjoying this episode of Romancing in Paris, you may also be interested in our sister podcast, Paris: A State of Mind, a wonderful show about the ins and outs of renting or buying property in Paris. Romancing in Paris will be right back after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Romancing in Paris. Surrounded by cafés and with very little traffic, it gives the feel of stepping back in time. Actually, you kind of have. Place de la Contrescarpe has origins at least as far back as the Middle Ages, when it served as a strategic defensive point for the city of Paris. The square derived its name from the Latin term Contrescarpe, meaning against the slope, referencing its location at the foot of the hill Sainte-Geneviève. During this period, the square was lined with defensive walls and fortifications, part of the Philippe Auguste city wall. Therefore, the area played a crucial role in safeguarding the city against potential invasions. In the 12th century, Place de la Contrescarpe witnessed the emergence of the Latin Quarter, known for its intellectual pursuits and thriving university culture. The square became a hub of activity, with scholars, students, and artists gathering in the surrounding cafes, taverns, and bookshops. Over the centuries, it continued to foster a vibrant intellectual and artistic community. Like I mentioned before, some of the literary luminaries such as Ernest Hemingway and James Joyce spent time here and lived nearby. Although the cafes around the square might have changed names since the time of those legendary writers, the square is still an ideal place to grab a drink, like at Apéro. For those who've come for a late afternoon stroll, the café called La Petite has a very reasonable happy hour, and the others all offer at least one thing in common: a stunning view over the square. Sit back and relax with your verre de vin and watch the Sorbonne students and La Mouffe residents coming and going, perhaps accompanied by some street musicians in the evening. It's an ideal, Parisian, and very romantic activity. If you'd like to carry on your exploring and had picked up some picnic supplies during the day, a short walk away is the subject of the last episode of the podcast on the 5th District, the Arène de Lutèce, the remains of the Roman amphitheater, those ancient discoveries I alluded to near the beginning of this podcast. I suggest you go back and listen to that episode if you haven't, as it's a very good pair to this one. Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Romancing in Paris. If you have a minute, ratings or reviews are always highly appreciated. You can find more great ideas for romantic things to do in Paris and beyond on my website, jetammeneither.com. And check out the Paris Underground Radio site for more wonderful podcasts on Paris and France. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.
This episode of Romancing in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.